Happy Wednesday to you, sixth graders. We're ready for lesson 3 in science today. Yesterday we took out two more kingdoms. We took out the protist kingdom and the fungi kingdom. We talked about the different types of protists, some that are animal-like, eat to get their energy, some are plant-like, make their own energy, some are fungi-like, absorb their energy. Um, Today we're going to get the last two kingdoms. It's the plant and the animal kingdom. You can see the title on the top of your notes that's sitting on your screen right now, How Are Plants and Animals Classified? Your book should be open to page 14. I'm going to start with the italics that says plants can make their own food. Animals get energy from other living things. Organisms in the plant and animal kingdoms can be classified into smaller groups. That's true of all the kingdoms, obviously. We'll get going as we talk about plants on pages 14 and 15 and then animals on the next page. Look around. How many different kinds of plants do you see? Plants come in many colors, sizes, and shapes. Number one, some are as tall as the coast redwoods in California, which can rise 112 meters. In science class, guys, all the measurements are given in the metric system. So you gotta usually take that one times 3 about. So you're talking something that is about 336 feet tall. That's probably taller than any building in the city of Milwaukee. So the giant redwoods out in California, just absolutely monstrous trees. You can see a picture of them on page 15, and if you look at that tree down at the bottom, it looks like it's kind of split in half, and then you see the little person way at the bottom, so it gives you an idea of the size of those trees. I visited that park once out in California when I was young, and they have trees that they've sawed tunnels through so that cars can drive right through them. That tells you the size of those trees. Pretty awesome that God can create something like that. Continuing on. Others, like the duckweed that covers many ponds, are tiny, as little as 0.6 millimeters tall, so practically microscopic, guys. But whether big or small, plants are important to all other living organisms on Earth. Most living things gain energy directly or indirectly from plants. Number 2 in your notes. What that means is plants make their own energy. So an apple tree, I eat an apple. I just got energy directly from a plant because I ate the apple. Um, Indirectly means I had a cheeseburger which had beef on it from a cow. Cow doesn't make its own energy. Cow ate grass. So the cow is getting the energy directly from the plant. I'm getting the energy indirectly from the plant because it has to go through the cow first before I eat the meat. So if you're eating the plant, that's directly. If you're eating something else that ate that plant, that's indirectly. And sometimes it can be a number of ways up that food chain. An animal ate a plant, that animal was eaten by a different animal, and then you ate that different animal. That's indirectly, guys. Okay, number 2 in your notes. And then finishing up that paragraph, it says this. Besides being a source of food, plants also help make Earth's climate stable. Number 3, you hear a lot of that in the news, guys, when we talk about global warming and the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is the release of carbon dioxide. So you and I breathe out carbon dioxide, and many of you know that plants take in carbon dioxide, so it's pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere for us. Carbon dioxide traps heat, guys. So the more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the more heat will be trapped. That'll warm up our Earth, is what they're saying. So plants help balance that for us. It gives us a stable temperatures that we have. Continuing on. Notice in the diagram on the next page that all plants can be divided into 2 groups. So guys, as you look at page 15 mainly, you start way at the top, you got the red plants up there. It divides into 2 groups that we're going to talk about, which are called non-vascular and vascular. And then we're going to talk about how vascular can be divided down into seedless plants and seed plants, and how those seed plants then can be divided down again to gymnosperms and angiosperms. So that's all what we're going to talk about on page 14, but that's what they referred to when they said look at that diagram. That diagram does a great job of breaking down those categories. Make sure you understand that diagram. It'll help you with some of your assignments. Okay, there's divided into 2 groups called vascular and non-vascular plants. Vascular plants have cells that form tubes for carrying water and nutrients throughout the plants. Number 4 on your notes. These tubes can carry material long distances, such as up the trunk of that 112-meter redwood. So it's kind of like how your body has arteries and veins for pumping blood and moving the nutrients around in your body. That's what a vascular plant has. It has a tube system for pumping water and the nutrients that it needs all around. And because it can move those things quickly, a complete distance, then it can make, obviously, tall plants. Continuing on paragraph 3, vascular plants can be divided into two groups, plants that make seeds and plants that do not. You probably are most familiar with the plants that do produce seeds. Some example of seed plants are tulips, grasses, maple trees, tomato plants. Some plants, I should have paused there to make sure you understand that they're going to talk about what a seedless plant is. That doesn't mean, my goodness, we'll never have another plant like that because it doesn't have a seed. We'll see how it comes from that. I don't have those lists of plants there, guys. Always feel free to add more notes that you think will help you. In other words, you're trying to think, hey, what do we call these seed plants, or can I think of an example of those things? They have that long list. I didn't include any in those lists. Some seed plants, middle of that paragraph, are gymnosperms. What are gymnosperms? They are seed plants that do not produce flowers first. So number 5 on your notes. They include plants that you might call evergreens, such as pine or fir. Okay, so you can see on your chart on 15, guys, they got gymnosperms and it's sitting right underneath one of those things. Angiosperms are seed plants that produce flowers. Horsetails and ferns are two kinds of seedless plants. So you have angiosperms. Obviously, an example of that is the rose on page 15. And then the seedless, they have those horsetails that they're talking about there. Now be careful if you read the picture, guys. They talk about being around for millions and millions of years ago and how they're slowly getting smaller and smaller. The millions and millions, not true. We'll talk about how some plants later on reproduce with things besides seeds. Mushrooms are a great example. I know mushrooms aren't plants, but mushrooms produce spores. Spores get just released and dropped out. Some plants, like ferns, do the same thing. They release spores to be able to get there. Okay, so you got number 6 there. 5 and 6 were both the same blank of one's producing flowers or not. Sometimes when I say produce flowers, I'm thinking, oh, so only flowers out there. No, you guys, if you think like of an apple tree starts with a flower at the beginning. It blossoms and then turns into a fruit. So many of your fruit trees obviously start out as flowers first. Last paragraph. Other plants called non-vascular plants do not have tubes, number 7, to carry materials. Instead, materials must pass slowly from one cell to another. Notice the key word slowly. For this reason, most non-vascular plants, such as mosses, are small. There are at least 232,000 species of vascular plants and about 16,000 species of non-vascular plants. So if your book asks you, there are way more non-vascular than vascular, false. There are way more vascular than non-vascular. Non-vascular will be small. Vascular can be tall. Vascular come in all shapes and sizes, but almost all non-vascular are small because it takes too long to transport the material. Turning the page, the animal kingdom. The last one we need to study starts on page 16. You probably recognize some of the organisms pictured on these 2 pages as animals. But you might think that some, such as the peacock worms or sea fans, are plants. The peacock worms, guys, is picture number 3 on number 17, the third one down. The sea fans are that top one on page 17. We'll talk about those in a second. But if you look at them, you and I would probably say, it looks like a plant to me. The animal kingdom is divided into about 35 different phyla. That's in your notes. Number 8. You can read about 6 of these phyla on the next page. Although animals can be very different, they all share certain characteristics. Animals are multicellular, and they cannot make their own food. Instead, they get food by the other blank in number 9, by eating other organisms. The cells of animals contain a nucleus, as do plants, but they do not have a cell wall. We'll talk about that coming up in a chapter, the difference between plant cells and animal cells. And so plants have cell walls, animals do not. Continuing on, we're about to get to note number 10. About 95% of all animal species on Earth are invertebrates. What's an invertebrate? Invertebrates are animals that do not have a backbone. They range in size from microscopic mites that cover your body to the giant squid, which can be 20 meters long. And so it's just a fact. We usually get grossed out when we talk about mites living on us, guys, but they're actually a blessing. They eat our dead skin cells, which is, if they didn't, we'd have way more dead skin cells piled up all over the place. But almost everything on this planet that we consider an animal do not have a backbone. And yet, when we ask you to name animals, you and I would probably name the 5% that do have a backbone. When we think of animals, we always think of vertebrates. We don't usually think about squiggly little worms and little bugs and things like that as animals, but they're animals. And there's way more types of bugs and things out there than anything else, so that's why they make up most of it. Okay, last paragraph on page 16. Only the phylum Chordates contain animals that are vertebrates, which is going into number 11 here. What's a vertebrate? It's an animal with a backbone. So fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Humans are mammals. We're all considered vertebrates. We'll talk a little bit more about chordates on the bottom of the next page over there. So they took their animal kingdom, they divided it into two of them, vertebrates and invertebrates, backbone or no backbone, and then the animals that go along with it. Okay, it said on page 16 there are 35 different phyla out there. We're going to talk about 6 of them, and I have some notes for each one of them they talk about. Most of them they talk about are the ones you and I don't think of, is why they gave it to us besides that bottom one. First one, these beauties of the coral reef are animals, not exotic plants. The fan-shaped creatures are corals called sea fans. The phylum, Cnidarians, also include jellyfish and anemones. Cnidarians have a single body opening that is usually surrounded by a ring of stinging cells, number 12 in your notes. So if you've ever been to the ocean where jellyfish are around, they'll warn you for that, because jellyfish have those stinging cells that burn you when you touch them. And we just understand that. Finding Nemo, the movie long ago, talked about anemones and the stinging cells that come with those. Phylum number 2, the mollusks. It's hard to believe, but this graceful animal is related to a clam. This nautilus belongs to the invertebrate phylum mollusks, which includes clams, squid, octopuses, snails, and slugs. And so as I get that list, guys, I think octopus is pretty big, slugs pretty small, and yet all part of the same phylum, because they don't have backbones, and they also have the next characteristic, which will be in your notes. All mollusks have soft bodies, and most have hard shells. So I think of snails, hard shells. I think of clams, hard shells. I think of octopus, nope, I don't think of hard shells, and so that's why it says most of them, guys. Number 3, segmented worms. I didn't put any notes for this one, but these feathers are actually the tentacles of a peacock worms that live on the ocean floor. The worm uses its tentacles to catch food. Other animals in this phylum are the common earthworm and leeches. So we got all the worm segments. Number 4, arthropods. You got introduced to this at the beginning of your chapter when we were working with arthropods. This tarantula spider is not an insect, but it does belong to the same phylum as insects, arthropods. Other spiders, crabs, millipedes, centipedes are also arthropods. All arthropods have 1, segmented bodies, 2, jointed appendages, and 3, hard skeletons on the outside of their bodies. Arthropods include almost 85% of the Earth's animal species. So when we take animals, we divide them into 35 different phylums, and one of those phylums has 85% of the animals. The other 34 phylums have just the remaining 15%, which is kind of crazy how many different insects they have been able to identify and name out there. So that one, pretty cool statistics. Number 5, the echinoderms. Sea stars are echinoderms, animals that live in the ocean and have tough, spiny skins. This phylum also includes brittle stars, sea lilies, sea urchins, and sea cucumbers. Echinoderms' body have a unique, your notes for number 15, five-part balance arrangement of the parts of these animals makes the parts of these animals easy to recognize. They have skeletons made of hard calcium plates inside their bodies. So I always think of a sea star, or what I call starfish, guys. That question I think is on your test. What echinoderm can be recognized by the five-part arrangement of their bodies? The starfish, the sea stars. So those are echinoderms. Last one are chordates. This impressive gorilla belongs to a group of animals called vertebrates, which is one kind of animal in the chordate phylum. Most vertebrates have a spinal cord and brain, which would be the phylum humans are in. The gorilla is warm-blooded. Warm-blooded means that its body can keep a certain temperature no matter what the outside temperature is. You guys are warm-blooded. Your body temperature needs the same. If it's really hot outside, you sweat. Why are you doing that? You're cooling your body temperature down so it stays at 95 degrees. So when I start to run really fast, my body says, whoa, we're starting to gain temperature here. Sweat to cool it down. I'm outside in the winter. I bundle up. Why? Because the air is so cold it will cool my body down. My body will not function. That's what hypothermia is, slowing my body down. And so we're warm-blooded, guys. We have to maintain our body temperature. A change of a few degrees up or a few degrees down means the death of us. Other vertebrates, such as reptiles, are cold-blooded. Their body temperature changes with that of their environment. So that's your blank, guys, with changes. But I don't want you to think that reptiles, if it's 85 degrees outside, their body is 85 degrees. If it's negative 10 degrees outside, their body's negative 10. You won't see reptiles in the winter, guys. Their body can't survive that, in the cold temperature, and yet their bodies aren't made to be able to maintain the body temperature like yours and mine are. That's why a lot of those animals will hibernate. They'll bury themselves in the ground deep down in our earth where they'll be able to survive. That's why also you'll see a lot of reptiles collecting sunlight. Like on sunny days, lots of times you'll see snakes out because that's how they absorb their heat to help maintain their body temperature. So you gotta know the difference between warm-blooded, body temperature stays the same, cold-blooded, it varies with the environment. All that is part of the chordate phylum, which is part of the animal kingdom. So now we got through all 6 kingdoms. You got a very brief introduction to the 6 kingdoms. We will spend way more time talking about plants and animals because they play a huge purpose in our life and are easier for us to study than the other 4 kingdoms. And we'll take those on in upcoming chapters. Blessings on your worksheet. Take your time with those few questions and remember the last one's extra credit. Have a great day.